The Kamasutra is about pleasure. It was actually written for women, for teaching a man how to pleasure a woman. And there's so many different versions of the Kama Sutra, because each time a king came into his kingdom, the Kama Sutra was commissioned, because they believed that if two couples, or if two people were able to reach their find pleasure in their physical intimacy, if that couple was happy, that meant society would be stable, and if society was stable, that meant the kingdom would be stable.
It's gonna be a really neat behind the scenes.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so weird.
Because something always magical happens.
Wait, what? Did you just make that up? Hey, it's Meredith for Real, the Curious Introvert. Listen each week as I talk with someone new. The topics are as ADD as I am, but they'll inspire you to stay curious and grow. Big thanks to our location sponsor, the UWF Historical Trust.
Hey, Curiositors, it's me, Meredith. Are you ready to talk about sex? I imagine this episode would just be like a fun USA to India comparison chat with a few helpful tips at the end, but what it ended up being was like a total thought interruption. My guest handed out next level invites to see sex, humanity, and the natural world as integrated parts, where shame and taboos are shown for what they are, cultural norms imposed upon us. I was also surprised to learn how ancient Indian philosophies have almost no delineation around pleasure, sex, or even gender. I got the impression that life and sex and enjoyment of both are less about carnality and physicality, but about being present in the moment with all of your senses. It's a really good episode. Be sure to listen to the end, where she shares mind-blowing tips and insights on having healthier attitudes towards sex for both you and your kids if you have them. Which, of course, these tips will be neatly summarized for you in the Saturday email, along with clickable links to some of the documents that she refers to. So if you're not already getting these value-packed e-nuggets of goodness, you could text REAL to 66866 and you'll be included. Okay, enjoy the show. We all remember getting the talk, SCX, or maybe you never got the talk. Or maybe you just have awkward memories of sex ed in school. Or maybe you just have awkward memories. My next guest is a leader in global mental health and sex education. She has a master's of science in global and mental health and works internally with communities to assess their mental health needs. She's worked in India, the Czech Republic, Thailand, and the US. And today, she's going to do a comparison of attitudes towards sexuality, East versus West, and give us a few tips on how we can all have healthier attitudes towards sex. Mobile, Alabama to India, yoga teacher and survivor of growing up with two brothers, Sheetal Kandola, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. I thought about singing the, the Salt and Pepper song, Let's Talk About Sex, Baby. But I was like, maybe I won't.
I've definitely used that in classrooms with kids before. They're just like, don't do that ever again.
Right. Parents are like, hey, they send a note to school with you. Like, could you not teach my kid that? Well, for the purposes of this conversation, I was looking up, like, what is East, what is West? And culturally, the West is like the US, Canada, Europe, Australia. And the East is technically, I think, anything east of like Africa. But sexual attitudes towards sexuality in those places are so different. So for the purposes of our lovely conversation today, what is East and what is West?
So I guess when I think about East and West, particularly in this conversation, I was obviously born and raised in the West, in the US. I was born in Ohio and lived in the West most of my life. So I could consider the West, the US, the UK, because that's where I studied. I studied in London, Australia, like you said, Canada, because these are all like Western, even Europe, these are all Western kind of thinking, and they've all kind of also colonized other places, like England and Europe has colonized a lot of places, so they've come with their Western ideals. When I'm talking about East, I'm specifically referring to India because that's what my experience is, I guess, limited to. I've also worked and lived in Thailand as well. But yeah, when I'm talking about the East, I'm specifically referring to India generally. But the East as a whole has a lot of ancient wisdom to offer, even China and India both.
Exactly. I love your global perspective of all the subjects that you and I have chatted about, but especially on attitudes of sex. I think attitudes on sex and romance and customs, norms, and taboos surrounding those is very telling of the inner workings of a culture. So I would like to know how you specifically, your view of sex in a more traditional Indian household, but in the U.S., what was your observation of that comparison of what was taught in your household compared to that of your white classmates?
Oddly enough, it was quite similar in that when I was growing up, and in Mobile, Alabama, in this very white Christian affluent school I went to, sex was considered bad, was considered taboo, was not talked about or overly talked about. Obviously, also talked about quite abusively. I mean, in my household, it wasn't talked about abusively. It was more just a taboo topic, kind of hush hush. And if any kind of scene came on from a Bollywood movie of two people kissing, my parents were like, "Look away," or like, "Let's change the channel really quick."
Yeah.
my classmates say also, like I just remember them playing. It was just like a joke to them. It was like it was just like that kind of really jokish type stuff, or with just a lot of confusion because I actually never received sex education growing up.
They didn't have it in your school?
They did not have it in my school. I went to high school in Mobile, Alabama, a place called UMS Wright, a very, very racist school. I would not recommend you to send your kids there. It was very kind of conformative, very brainwashy type school. But yeah, they did not have sex education. I do remember one like lecture, and it was just like, "Do not have it. You will like get an STD," kind of like that, like very like, you will get pregnant. Kind of like putting more fear in kids and fearing people rather than like arming us with knowledge and our options and what to do. So that was my experience with, I guess, sex education growing up. And then, being a young kid, being an Indian in the deep South as well.
Yeah. So at home, it was just a void. It was not talked about. There was no conversation. And then at school, it was totally fear-based.
Yeah, fear-based. And like, oh, haha. Like there was like this penis game where like boys would gradually say penis very loud. So it was like a joke or like very like, suppressed. So kind of, suppressed in both areas.
Yep. Different flavors of suppression for sure. You wrote in an article that sexuality isn't just about sex. Can you explain what you meant by that a little?
Yeah, so sexuality, and if you look in the ancient texts like the Kamasutra, sex is the physical act, and any two beings, can have sex. But the Kamasutra is really about pleasure, and not everyone, or basically the human mind, can really only understand what pleasure is, and be able to work towards creating pleasure. And sexuality is also about pleasure, it's about seduction, it's about desire. And this is what sex is about. Sex is our highest form of energy, is what Tantra says. Another philosophy that is kind of misconstrued in the West, but Tantra is basically a philosophy that kind of encourages people to embrace everything. Don't deny anything. Don't deny, sex. Don't deny your sin. Don't deny the darker side of yourself. So sexuality is a very encompassing topic that really, really, I think if you get to the core of it, what we're all seeking when we're looking for good sex is not really good sex. It's pleasure, good intimacy. So I think that's like, I get briefly about sexuality, what it kind of encompasses.
So how is Tantra misrepresented in the West?
Yeah, so Tantra is actually kind of seen in the West as like, it's really focused on this, on just sex, and it gets, a negative reputation, but, there's negative things to everything. So people see Tantra as like, okay, if I learn Tantra, then I'm going to like learn how to have someone have sex with me, or, seduce some woman. But Tantra is really just falling into your fullness of your humanity, of accepting every aspect of you, of allowing yourself to be your best self and live your best life, and allowing you to experience the ecstasy of God, of the divine. So that's why I think it's very hard to describe Tantra, because now, like yoga everyone has so many different misconceptions about it in their mind, but Tantra is just like fully embracing life.
So it's almost like the feelings, the experiences, the thoughts, the pleasure all around sex and sexual romantic relationships. It's like it's an elevated experience that's considered spiritual.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily have to be with sex either. It could just be with like you could do your Tantra practice while walking in the park or doing your meditation. Doesn't have to be anything intimate either. It could just be about you fully diving in that moment and experiencing everything that moment has to offer you. Noticing the wind blowing on your face, or noticing the smells of, the cars passing, or the roses in the garden. So being able to take in all your senses and being very mindful about all your senses.
Being present. I love that. That's really cool. Yeah. How do displays of affection between couples differ from east to west?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question, because, in the West, it's very normal to have a boyfriend, have a girlfriend, hit, hug, kiss, be quite open in public. And in places like India, which the culture is quite conservative, and I'll explain why that is in a minute. But currently, people, it's not really culturally acceptable to hug a person of the opposite sex in public, or hug or kiss, or doing that kind of PDA stuff. Maybe in bigger cities like Delhi and Mumbai, but generally no. And this is kind of dates back to pre-colonial India. So India has always been invaded, always been intruded by colonizers, by invaders, and they brought with them their own set of baggage and their ideas about the human body. Now, before colonialism, before invaders came, India, invented the Kamasutra. So they were very sexually expressive and very sexually open. When these people started coming in, they started bringing this Catholic mentality that, I think around 325 AD, that was being formed in the Turkish area, that the body was bad, that sex was bad, that you should feel guilty. All these notions about sex were brought into India, as well as invaders started to, kidnap, rape women. So the culture became very conservatized to protect them and to protect themselves. So now, because of all that, now it's kind of like you see that manifestation of that happening today, of, these things being much more suppressed. And a lot of our knowledge, our literature, our readings have been locked away from us, have been hidden from us. So even like the most pronounced scholars are still discovering things about our history that we didn't know, because they've all been taken away from us. So really kind of, I guess, finding our way back is been a bit difficult and painful, because we've kind of trying to get back to that place that we were, and now everything has kind of been moved everywhere. So it's really interesting. Modern day India is growing very fast and it's very dynamic, and all these things that I think that, me being someone who thinks like the West, or was raised in the West, has very an Eastern or Indian heart and soul, I love to see what works in the West and what I can use in the East, and use it to create a bridge between both. And also when I'm, teaching sex education, understanding how, maybe like, for example, in the US or in the West, they have all this big topics about consent now.
Right.
And that's something that I think, India is just starting out with doing more of understanding, what is consent, because we're kind of raised being like very respectful to our elders, very respectful to adults, very respectful to anyone who's bigger than us. That if someone really wanted to hug and kiss us, we wouldn't say no, because we weren't raised like that. We were raised to be very, very respectful of elders. So it's interesting, things like this, like consent workshops, saying, no, you have the right to say no to an uncle or auntie if you don't feel comfortable hugging them or kissing them. And these things I think we are sharing with each other. And what I see is like very clear to me how I'm moving between both spaces and able to use both the ancient wisdom of India and the Kamasutra and the Tantra and yoga and meditation, and then also the kind of new information, how to frame things to make life better for people.
I do find your position really interesting and unique, because anytime you can rediscover history, it can be very illuminating to your current situation, and it can influence the decisions and policies and how families raise their children. So I think I didn't know that the colonizers hid away aspects of Indian history, but that was unfortunately very clever on their part, because if you can rob people of their identity and change the history, literally rewrite the history, then it can affect the way that you can control them, because you can introduce aspects of shame and fear and really become controlling. So I'm wondering now that you're in the position you're in and you see trends towards India as a whole going towards subjects like consent. Do you see any movement of attitudes there going to like a pre-colonized perspective of sexuality?
I think it's always hard to go back. I think that now people are, though, waking up to the beauty and the richness and the amazingness of our ancient texts and our writers and our philosophers and our artists, especially the ones that come from an ancient form. I think there's a lot of people now really grounding themselves in our ancient practices now. And, I think that the way that happened has been maybe a bit roundabout, but I'm so glad and so grateful that people are coming back to our ancient texts and are coming back to realizing the beauty and the richness and the amazingness of this culture. And I do see a lot of people more interested in learning about what what the Kamasutra said, what for example the Bhagavad Gita is timeless. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Bhagavad Gita.
No.
Okay, so the Bhagavad Gita is basically a spiritual text, and it's based within the Mahabharata. Now the Mahabharata is like the biggest epic of all time. It's like bigger than the Iliad and the Odyssey combined. And it's a pity that I had to read the Iliad and the Odyssey in school, but I never got to read the Mahabharata in school.
Yeah.
Because Mahabharata is amazing. If you ever have time, go on YouTube, type in Mahabharata, English subtitles, and you will always get some relevant spiritual lesson, no matter where you are in your life. It is so timeless and so powerful. And there's a lot of characters and a lot of metaphors.
Hey everyone, just a quick interruption to show gratitude to our sponsors and give you some special deals. So I don't have kids, but I also want to tell you about It's Your Magazine. They're a national family-centered publishing company with free parent magazines. They have parenting advice, events, and inspiration. I'm actually in a networking group with the publisher, and this guy is all about family. You can view a free magazine in cities in Texas, Oregon, Washington, and Florida by checking them out at itsyourmagazine.com.
The UWF Historical Trust. We shoot the show at the Museum of Commerce and the Pensacola Museum of History, and it's not just an amazing step back into the 18 and 1900s, but it's an event space too. And because they love creative collaborations and have spaces for all party sizes, they're pretty much the perfect venue to make your event stand out. So if you need a unique space in downtown Pensacola, take a look at historicpensacola.org. And if you want to tour one of the 12 museums, get your tickets in person so you can show the agent one of my emails and get $2 off an adult ticket. Get emails by texting REAL to 66866.
And in sec. So I've always felt iffy about pesticides. Then the mosquitoes got so bad, I would get covered in them from walking from my house to the car. I called INSEC, and to say I've been impressed is an understatement. When the treatment wasn't quite doing it, the owner actually came to my house. He found the breeding sites, identified the species of mosquito, and adjusted my treatment to that species. That's when I found out he's also a beekeeper, and pollinator issues are always top of mind. So if you're in the Florida Panhandle or Gulf Coast of Alabama, give him a call, ensec.net. Now back to the show.
Anyway, so in the Mahabharata, Lord Krishan, this is Lord Krishan behind me, that we were talking about earlier, Lord Krishan teaches Arjun, who is the greatest warrior of all time, the meaning of yoga in the middle of battle.
Whoa, that seems like a bad time to learn about yoga.
Well, Lord Krishan is a divine being, so he's able to stop time and teach him yoga.
Well, in that case.
But he teaches him all the different aspects and the paths of yoga, not just like, I think a lot of time people in the West considered yoga just the asanas or the physical poses, which that's a very, very teeny, tiny, small part of yoga. Yoga is an ocean and a huge, vast, like, treasure of wisdom and of knowledge. It's this whole system. It's a way of living. So in this text, you see a lot of people now, I think, grounding in this text and finding their way back to this text and reading. I mean, I've read the Bhagavad Gita maybe 5-6 times, different versions, and every single time you get a new understanding, you get a new meaning depending where you are in your life. So yeah, I do see people coming back to our text and coming back to spirituality and coming back to grounding themselves in what has been, kind of hidden from us for so long.
When you mentioned the Kamasutra, in the West has a lot to do with Cosmopolitan magazine. So can you explain the difference between the Kamasutra in the Indian writings versus what most of us picked up in 8th grade?
Yeah, so in the West, they consider Kamasutra just about these positions. And like I mentioned earlier, the Kamasutra is not focused on positions. The positions are also a very, very small part of what the Kamasutra has to offer. Now, like I said, the Kamasutra was written 300 AD, thousands of years ago. And the Kamasutra is about pleasure. It was actually written for women, for teaching a man how to pleasure a woman. And there's so many different versions of the Kamasutra, because each time a king came into his kingdom, the Kamasutra was commissioned, because they believed that if two couples or if two people were able to reach their find pleasure in their physical intimacy, if that couple was happy, that meant society would be stable. And if society was stable, that meant the kingdom would be stable. So their whole life was based on people finding their pleasure and their happiness within the relationships, which would obviously ripple out into the kingdom. And so the Kamasutra is a very, very powerful text, and it has lots of offerings and lots of knowledge on how to, I don't like the word seduce, but I guess seduce is the only word I'm limited to. Seduce a lover. The Kamasutra is basically focused on refinement and beauty and enchantment and making love and having pleasure. And, in the West, it's very much degraded to like, oh, you need to do like this position to like get this. And like, it's very much like physical goal oriented, which is what it's not at all.
Yeah, it's almost like our Industrial Revolution also had an effect on our attitudes on sex. But what you just said about, when you're happy in your sexuality and you're like when couples are happy with one another and they're experiencing intimacy on all levels, how that really does make society better. Like I just got goosebumps because that's so true. And we don't always value it in that way. And we definitely have almost, like an industrial attitude. Like, if you pull it down the assembly line and then you push these 3 buttons, then you get what you want out of it. I don't know. It's not as like, I mean, I'm not in every American household, but I'm going to go out there and say that this is not a normal, typical approach for Americans to view sexuality, but I love it. I love the interruption of our thoughts about what we have always perceived as typical.
Yeah. You have to change this.
Do you if you had to create a comprehensive sex program for youth, so I'm like talking to, educator you now, and you do this, but what would be what?
I'm doing it actually now in India. So yeah.
Well, tell me, what would be, if you could advise all educational systems on what to cover in sex education, what would be some top things that you would want covered? Like, what are like your top 3?
The first thing I think I would do, because, as a researcher as well, I would definitely want to look at the context. So depending on if I'm in the US or in India, but generally speaking, I think a comprehensive sex education needs to have, number one, putting self-love at the heart of everything, putting self-love.
Are you talking about the attitude of self-love? Are you talking about self-pleasure?
So I guess both.
Okay.
Because actually the way I always introduce sex education, and I've done sex education class to an older group here in India. I'm just now starting to work with adolescents. But the way I always introduce sex to my kids is sex stands for sacred energy exchange.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Did you, you made that up?
I didn't make that up. I'm sure I heard it from somewhere. I didn't really make any of this up. all this knowledge is recycled from, teachers and things I've heard. All knowledge is recycled. So I don't want to take credit for this. Okay. I'm not that smart.
Fair enough.
But I'm smart enough to pass it on. So SEX stands for Sacred Energy Exchange. And your first and your most important sexual partner is always yourself. So get to know yourself first before you allow someone else in, or before you invite someone else in. Now, I know that's not always a choice for many people because of sexual assault, sexual abuse, and that's okay. Be gentle with yourself. Seek healing for yourself. Understand what the root cause of your pain is, what the root cause of maybe if you're having sexual issues or a problem with your sexuality, where that root cause is coming from. Because your sexuality is your strongest link to your spirituality. Once your earth spirit is able to understand your heaven spirit, then you can become aligned and more centered and more grounded in where you are. If you're scared of your sexuality, if you're scared of yourself, that means you're scared of yourself. So once you're able to embrace yourself, you'll be able to embrace yourself as a divine being, hopefully as a divine being, and understand how sacred you are and your body is and your soul is and sex can be. So that's how I like to introduce sex to my kids. But aside from that premise, aside from that grounding of, we're all divine beings, we're all pure and divine beings, no matter what happened to us, no matter what society told us, we are pure and divine beings. So get to know yourself, masturbate, play with yourself, find ways to play with yourself, look at yourself in the mirror, talk to yourself in the mirror, dance with yourself in the mirror, romance yourself, take yourself out, do these things to really, really love yourself. Anything that gets you closer to yourself is so important. It's so important before, to love yourself first in any kind of regard. And other things to teach that I usually teach in this, when I'm teaching sex education, it needs to be comprehensive. So sex is directly linked, not only talking about, I guess, when I talk about sex, I'm not only talking about anatomy, so I'm not only talking about the body, your parts, what things are called, contraception, protection. These are all very important things. And these are, kind of generally included in sex education. But aside from that, mental health is very important to teach kids, number one, how to communicate. What is healthy communication? What does that look like? What does assertive communication look like? What does aggressive communication look like? What does passive communication look like? How do we use these different types of communication styles to maybe get what we want or get our needs met? When is the right time to use these communication styles? Not only communication styles, but understanding your feelings, understanding your emotions, understanding, what is making me angry, understanding, how to use our feelings to be expressed. I feel angry when you take my pencil, I feel these kind of very clear statements, kind of very clear like templates, if you want to say, for kids to use, which I think is very very essential and very easy. You know, it makes sense to teach this, but we were never taught this growing up. So mental health, talking about, now in some contexts, gender might not be the most easiest to talk about. But I think it needs to be gender transformative. Understanding that gender is not just boy and girl. Gender is a spectrum. Gender can be expressed. Gender is what you want it to be. And understanding also that the different notions society and the media and people have told us of how a boy should be and how a girl should be and how you need to act like a lady and be a man and don't cry, all these notions that we have digested unknowingly, and how to kind of undigest these, kind of unlearn these learnings that we've learned. So mental health, self-love, gender transformative, human rights. I think kids need to understand that, you know, these are your human rights. You know, the UN has a great list of documents. Great list of articles. What are your rights? Talking about what your rights are. How do you express those rights? How do we see our rights being violated? What can we do when we see our rights being violated? Then obviously consent. Consent is major. I think consent is, you know, huge on just understanding what consent means and also practicing consent, practicing saying no, because, you know, as an Indian woman, a lot of times we were always taught to say hanji, yes, yes, what do you want? You want tea? You know, we were taught to be very accommodating. So understanding when I have to say, no, I need to take care of myself. I can't do this. You know, maybe a different time. So understanding when to say no and putting that into practice. So I think I covered pretty much the thing that in my comprehensive sex ed.
Completely. And I was just thinking, I was about to ask you, you know, as we wrap up, I just wish we could talk forever. This is so fun. I was about to ask you, like, what tips you would give listeners who are adults to have healthier attitudes towards sex, but I couldn't help but hear those tips in your educational, you know, checklist towards students. And I was like, dang, I wish that I could go back in time and teach, you know, little Meredith all of these things, how helpful that would be for me and so many of the people that I grew up with. But are there any other things that practically you feel Western adults should keep in mind for either having healthier attitudes towards sex themselves or towards passing those on to their children?
Yeah, I think because I like, you know, we talked about this before, so I kind of wrote out three kind of tips I guess I would give other people. I think, you know, if you look at the Kamasutra, they never talk about the genitals in an abusive way. And I think in modern day, you know, people talk about the penis and vagina quite abusively. They use these very bad words to kind of, I guess, put it, I don't know, demean it or put it down or just make fun of it. But I think it's really important to be very mindful about the language that we're using when we are talking about our sexual parts or our sexual beings. Because, you know, what the words that we use very much changes our actions, you know? So I think it's number one, being very mindful of the language you choose to use. There's a word in the Kama Sutra, it's called, I wrote it down? Chandan Mahal. Means like the palace of sandalwood for the vagina, and Mandan Chatri means the umbrella love god for the clitoris.
Wow!
So there's these beautiful words that are used to talk about body parts in the Kama Sutra. So just be very mindful about your language and what words you're using. And number two is slow down. Whenever you are, you know, making love or you are with a partner, be very, very, very mindful. Just slow down as slow as you can go. Slowing down allows all of our sense to open and us to be more aware of what's happening. So the male, I guess, sexuality is kind of aligned with a fire. It's very quick to ignite and also very quick to burn out. It starts down here and goes up there. Well, whereas the female sexuality is more like water, where it starts up here and it goes down here. It's very slow to boil and slow to cool down. So, you know, we're working with two very, very different energies and two very different opposing forces. So finding that balance is very important, and slowing down kind of helps can help couples to find that balance more. And also, like, turn off your phone when you when you are like when you're with your partner. Just like give them an hour, 2 hours, 2 hours, whatever time you need. Just turn off your phone. Don't look at your phone when you're with them. Like, set some time apart. Just turn off the phones, or technology in general. Because I feel like people today are just so engrossed in their phones. And, you know, I even get like, when I'm with someone and their phone, I just walk away. I'm like, okay, you be on your phone when you're ready, then let me know. I'll be here.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And also just, you know, honor yourself, love yourself. Like I said, like you are your first most important sexual partner. So get to know yourself, play with yourself, masturbate with yourself, take yourself out on dates, date yourself. And, you know, hopefully I think also looking into these ancient texts doesn't hurt at all either. Not the cosmopolitan version, but the ancient version of the Kamasutra, the different iterations. And there's a lot that you can find out there. So
I think broadening your worldview is a great way to interrupt your thought patterns that aren't working for you anymore. And I feel like you have just 100% brought that today. Thank you so much. If you think of any other helpful insights, rabbit trails, articles that you think my listeners would benefit from, I'll put them in the Saturday email. Just email them to me, and then I'll bake them into that email so that people who want to look up the ancient texts, you know, it's hard with maybe not knowing how to spell things, or, you know, we'll link them all in that email for them. So thank you again. Yeah. This was so awesome. You did great. That's a wrap, girly. Woo! Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, you'll also like the episode about ending forced marriage in the United States, episode 48. Stay tuned next week when I talk with a filmmaker about LGBTQ relationships throughout history. Oh, and if you have an iPhone, can you do me a quick favor? While you're in the podcast app, scroll down to the review section and write a quick review letting me know what you like about this show. Thanks so much. Stay curious and grow.